Now we are going to be taking a look at 2.4, which talks about this thing called fact families. It's pretty much a review, a summation of 2.1 through 2.3, but I just want to do a quick video to help explain it and then also talk about this. Right at the beginning of this section, it talks about this change of notation. So normally, you know, when you put a +3, a plus in front of the number, it was positive, so these were equivalent. Also, these are equivalent, so a little subtraction symbol up here is the same as a minus in front of it, which is why we change it to plus a positive if it's minus a negative. But now we're going to start getting away from putting, especially up here, putting that extra plus there to show that it's a +3. And just if there's not a sign in front of it, if it's not subtracted, or if it's not a negative, then assume it's a positive number. Okay, so notation can be really tricky as we continue on, especially when you're subtracting numbers, and I've said this 100 times, subtraction is difficult, so just learning to change every subtraction into an addition will make things a lot easier moving forward. Now looking at fact families, they're just looking at different ways to write things. Looking at the different properties, if you look at these first two, just instead of 3 + 2, you write it as 2 + 3. That means the same thing. That's a commutative property, meaning you can add in any order that you want to. Over here, we're just writing it in different ways. So 5 - 3 = 2. This is getting into the idea of learning to solve equations, learning that if I subtract 5 from one side, or if I subtract 3 from, in this case, it's 3 from one side, I would subtract it from the other, just learning that they're the same thing. So this is the basic idea behind fact families, because on this one, all you're doing is, you would subtract b, and that's where the c minus b comes from, and so forth. Here you would subtract a, and that's where the c minus a comes from. All right, so there's just rewriting the same problem, a plus b equals c, different ways. And that's what we're doing in this investigation, is just learning these properties well enough to rewrite them in different ways. On part A, on A are 1 and 2. On 1, it says it wants the A and B to be positive rational numbers. So that's any positive whole number. And so if you say A is 2 and B is, let's say, 7, then it would be 2 + 7 is equal to 9. Right? Or you can rewrite that as 9 - 7 = 2. 9 - 2 = 7. So when it's saying write them in different ways, that's what it's looking for. So we're writing them in different ways using the fact families above right here. So we get that one once we choose the A and B, and then we rewrite them those two ways. So here's the A and B. Then we subtract the B from to the right side, and then leave the A, and then we subtract the A and leave the B. Okay, and that's what you're doing for all of these. But on number 2, it's just saying, hey, use negative rational numbers, so any two negative numbers. 3, positive rational number. A is a positive number, B is a negative, and then 4, A is a negative and B is a positive. So the only thing you have to be careful, like if we look here, so if A is a negative, so let's say -2, and B is a positive, right? So then your fact families, your first one would be -2 + 7 is equal to 5. Your second one would be -2 is equal to 5 - 7. And your last one would be 7 is equal to 5 - -2. And that's where you have to be careful, is right here, the minus and negative. That is equal to plus a positive, so we know that it is correct. So you can write it as that, but I, again, do not like to subtract. I would rather change that to a 5 + 2. Okay, so for each of these, you would have your 3 different ways to write it. Down here, you're doing the same thing, like on B. Write a related subtraction sentence for each, and you would do the same thing. Like this would be your A, this would be your B, this would be your C. So if we were to rewrite it, it would be, let's say, -3 is equal to -5 minus -2. Okay, that's one way to write it, where we leave the A, subtract the B over to the other side. Okay, write a related addition. So that would be, you can write that different ways. Like in this case, this could be your A, this could be your B, and this could be your C. So it's already given to you in one of these forms. You would just rewrite it as that. And then the rest of these are pretty similar. Now in D and E, we're getting into the idea of isolating the variable. So on A, it's saying write a related sentence. So the idea is to get to the point where, okay, I'm going to leave. So if this is A, and we're going to do plus and negative. So this is B, and that's C. I'm going to do N is equal to 35 minus negative 5. Okay, so it's just like what we did before, but now the goal down here is to think about, hey, when you rewrite it, does it make it easier to find the value of N? Because if you rewrite it like this, yes, it does, because you can just say, well, N has to be 40 to make that true. But if you rewrote it, let's do this. If you rewrote it as B equals, so we kept B by itself, so it would be negative 5 is equal to 35 minus N. That maybe not so much. So we want them to explore, we want the student to explore, okay, how can I rewrite this in a way that would make it easier for me to get the variable by itself? So that's what D and E are looking for on those. And that's it for the fact families. Like I said, it's a pretty quick little lesson here. It's just putting all of these ideas together that we've been looking at in 2.1 to 2.3, and then just playing around with the rules. It's like a sandbox, just playing around so we can understand it a little bit better. We can get creative, because learning to move values around, learning to understand what properties, what we can do and what we can't do mathematically is super important as we get into and building up to solving equations.